Well, I think I've been waiting for it to happen for 7 years. So for me, it's quite nice. You know, and we sold Sensible to Codemasters in 1999, and originally I was working on a Canon photo game, which actually never transpired to come out in the end. And I'm glad that Codemasters decided to use some of the properties they've got sitting, you know, Micro Machine, Sensible Soccer. I think it's good for the company. It's about time it happened. And for me personally, of course, Sensible Soccer is great. So you can run a development team without going bust.
Sorry?
You can run a development team without going bust more easily in mobile phones. It's very, very hard to run independent development teams particularly in the UK at the moment. So myself and Mike particularly, having run development teams in the past, didn't want to take on a larger team when you see many of your friends and associates struggling. Running. There was a statistic about last year that in the previous 2 years 75% of games firms have gone bust in the UK. To put it in perspective, developers.
Yeah.
So, you know, sometimes good business, it's like gambling, sometimes good business is getting off the table. From a business point of view, forget the creative side, just from a business point of view. You know, you don't want to, it's never any fun if you're struggling for money because all your decisions are based on survival and not on quality. Okay, well in about 1997 or 1998, we had a game called Sex, Drugs and Rock and Roll, which we were developing at Sensible Software when we were still running Sensible Software, and it was signed to Warner, and then Warner got bought by GT. And Sex, Drugs and Rock and Roll was a very 18 certificate kind of game, and Warner were quite up for it and they backed us up with the big contract. It was great. They also did a version of Sensible Software on the same contract. But GT bought Warner and as a software arm. Warner sold their software arm to GT, and GT were owned by the people who own Walmart. They were part of the same thing, and they're a big Bible Belt American company, so they didn't really want Sex, Drugs and Rock and Roll. Unfortunately, 2/3 of our development staff were working on it. The Sensible, so it was a huge problem for us. So we eventually got the game back, and we were looking for different publishers to pitch the game to. So my first encounter with Codemasters was actually pitching Sex, Drugs and Rock and Roll in about 1998, I think it was, around about 98. Of all the publishers we saw about 20. Codemasters were our preferred publisher, the people we liked the most. So when we came a year later, we decided that we would just be Sensible down and sell it on. Codemasters were our first choice to sell to. And okay, I'll give you the really long version of the story. We'd negotiated a contract with Codemasters to sell Sensible Software to Codemasters, and I was dealing mainly with David Darling at the time. And David, as ever, was pretty elusive. He could be quite elusive and hard to pin down sometimes. And I'd not been able to get in touch with him for 2 or 3 months, and we were waiting for this deal to go through. Anyway, I went on holiday with my wife to Rome. We stayed in Hotel Rome, it was very nice, right? We've been there. And wandered up to the bar upstairs at the top of the hotel. And as I was sitting there, my wife, as some men do when they're not behaving very well, I noticed this girl's legs like on the table adjacent. Okay? So I was looking at this girl's legs, and then I looked at the guy sitting next to her, as you do, you know, nice woman, you know, and it was David. So totally unbeknown to me and him, because we didn't really know each other particularly well at the time, David had gone to the same city in the same hotel at the same time as me. This was Easter, 1999, which was fantastic because basically enabled me to form more of a personal relationship with David, and it really sped the contract. Got signed within a month, which was great. So I tried to pin him down on the phone for 6 months, and I found him in a hotel on holiday. That's basically that story. So that's how Sensible Software got part of why that was getting bought by Codemasters. And then a long time ago, because even the sensible soccer history, I worked on cannon fodder for a cannon fodder version which didn't come out on PlayStation 2 in 90. No, it must have been PlayStation, not PlayStation 2 in 97, 98. No, sorry, 99, 2000. That's right. And then that kind of got shelved because when the London studio Codemasters closed, it was there, so it kind of closed with the studio, which was a bit unfortunate. I worked on the boxing games, Nassim and Tyson, and at the same time in the London studio, just before it closed, after doing Nassim boxing, I was also working on a prototype for a football game, which was actually club football. It was a club football prototype. Now what happened was I had a prototype done in London, a prototype done in Keighley, Southern, and they chose to go with the Southern one. They didn't go with the one that we'd been working on in, which I was quite upset about, in London. But we carried on with cannon fodder after that, so I didn't mind too much until that stopped. But that was my first dealings with a football game with Codemasters. And so I think club football came out and did its thing, and then when they decided to redo sensible soccer, I'd already worked on a football game with Codemasters in a way, with this prototype of a game which didn't come out. And so it was, I guess it was logical for them also to come and ask me, having worked on the game before, and I've worked on this company for 7 years, so I've been mainly a consultant. I've been an employee for a short period of time, but mainly been a consultant with the company.
Okay.
So it was kind of logical to ask me to do it, I think. As regards the timing, I think the timing was just purely down. I don't know. Losing my memory why. The timing was particularly now, but I've just been waiting for it to happen for 6 years, so 7 years. I was glad when it happened. And we're developing it with Kuju up in Sheffield. They actually have worked on several different other versions of Sensible Soccer before anyway in the past. So I kind of know some of the people up there anyway, which has been quite nice to work with them. Bearing in mind I'd done the mobile ones about 6 months, started the mobile, no, we first published the mobile one about 6 months before we were asked to do it. So it's kind of been a logical progression. It was gradually coming back more and more. So it wasn't a huge shock. I think these days making games is not the same as it used to be by any stretch of the imagination. It's virtually impossible to make an original game now. So you tend to work on licensed games or conversions of other games, or very derivative games. So for me to work on Sensible Soccer is the nearest I can kind of get to doing an original game, in the sense it's a license, but it's something which I'm associated with, designing original ones. I think what's interesting about Sensible Soccer, having worked on it and looked at what's been happening with Pro Evolution Soccer and FIFA recently. Obviously, Pro Evolution Soccer has been the best football game in the market for the last 6 or 7 years now. FIFA has been the best-selling one for longer than that, about 8 or 9 years. I think that in a way that they found themselves in a position that Sensible Soccer did in about 1996 or 7, in that when you establish a game a certain way and people are familiar with it, it becomes very hard to change the game. So the technology is changing, but you're kind of limited to what you can do with the game because people like it a certain way and they don't want it to change. And I think that's very much where Pro Evolution Soccer kind of finds itself now, in that, Pro Evolution Soccer 5 that's come out, people are saying they prefer 4, or some people are saying they prefer 3. People are very resistant to change with something they're familiar with. And I think, funnily enough, Sensible Soccer is almost like a breath of fresh air, or refreshing, even though it's a version of an older game, if you like. It's substantially modernised. It's not like Sensible Soccer was then. It's in 3D. It has 360-degree controls. It uses both analog sticks. We've added a sprint button similarly to what you get on FIFA and Pro Evolution Soccer, and powered kicks, and we've added a little bit of goalkeeper control and stuff. So we've used Sensible Soccer as a basis. So we've used Sensible Soccer as a basis. We're using a 3D engine. We're using a lot of really good animation and a very nice original kind of cartoony look. And we've added bits, we've stolen bits from FIFA and Pro Evolution Soccer, and we've also added a couple of original elements, which to me, in the past, making games, and this is any kind of game, doesn't matter what kind of game it is, the formula for success is usually, if you're doing something original, to take two established things and borrow heavily from elements of them, and then add some original content and kind of merge them. If you become too original, you tend to find that you alienate people too much. So it's all about giving people so they can pick something up and play it straight away, basically, people feel familiar with it. Yes, it's very similar speed. I mean, it's something which people struggle to do with three-dimensional animation quickly, and it is substantially faster than any other game on the market at the moment, which makes it more fun. You know, your decision-making time, how you think, the adrenaline of playing the game is upped because of the speed. I would say, an analogy I would use is, a lot of people talk about simulations and games being simulations. You know, FIFA is a simulation because it looks like what you see on the television, which of course it does it quite well. But if you want to simulate football as a computer game, sensible soccer is more of a simulation of what happens when you actually play football on a pitch, in terms of how you think and what your decision-making time is, and how you plan. So it's more of a psychological simulation as opposed to a graphical simulation. The graphics are representing the psychological world, if you like, if that's not too pretentious. And I think it's true of a lot of games. You know, a good game immerses you psychologically, and I think people have abused the word simulation for a long time. They've trivialised it. You know, how do you simulate if you're talking to a woman in a bar you've met and you're chatting a woman up in a bar? Okay, how do you simulate what's going through your head? You don't just look at the woman. It's not just visual. There's millions of other things that are going on, and people kind of miss the whole point of what simulation is. It's simulating a feeling, or simulating a circumstance, a set of decisions, you know, an environment. It's how you best simulate the environment, and it's not purely visual. Not when you're playing it. You know, if you're watching a film, then great, it's all visual and, you know, sound and stuff. But when you're actually involved in it, simulation is more psychological, and it's kind of missed. That's why games like, say, Resident Evil, when it first came out, and it was the first game to have real shock in it. I don't remember when it first came out and you had those things suddenly jumping out, and we weren't used to seeing those things. That was simulating the psychology of horror, if you like, and fear for the first time. That's why people responded to it so well. I think people have. Again, it's a different school of game design, if you like. I like to think that when people are playing the game, they're not conscious of the controller being in their hand. They're not looking down at their hands. Just like when you drive, you're not looking at the pedals or the wheel, you're just looking at the cars ahead, or the speeding signs ahead these days, the speed cameras and stuff. But I think that we have got a simple system. It's very similar to the original game. It's very similar to the controls that were on the Mega Drive version, actually, in terms of buttons, in that you've got a pass button and an after-touch kick button. So, you know, we're using 2 buttons instead of 6, 7. You've got sprint and you've got the directions, and there's a lot you can do. It's just you don't need to move your fingers all around the controller in order to execute it. You can execute straight shots, powerful shots, weak shots, bending right and left, lobbing it high up in the air, dipping it over a wall, chipping a little chip shot up over a defender. You can do that all using just one button and the direction. So you don't need 8 buttons. The aftertouch system, which is quite hard to describe in words, but when you feel it, it's quite natural. It's like if you're running up and you kick and then you pull backwards quickly afterwards, the ball will go up in the air. If you run up and kick and you push to the right, the ball will bend to the right, or bend to the left, or go up. Then you can combine it, so you can you can kick, pull back and push forward, and then it'll go up, then it'll dip down again, so you get a bit of topspin, as you would with a free kick, to try and dip it over a wall and under the bar. In terms of competitions, you've got friendlies. We've got there's 300 club sides and about 70 national sides, and 4 what we call custom sides. And you can basically play friendlies between them. You can play preset competitions, so we have 45 preset competitions, so like a kind of Champions League style competition, a Premiership style. We've got 8 different countries with 2 divisions, First Division, Second Division, Cup, League Cup, some of them we've got a Shield. We've got England, France, Germany, Holland, Italy, Portugal, Spain, Scotland. There are club countries. And then we've got 70 national sides, and we have the World Cup and the African Nations Cup and European nations and so on. Then we have DIY competitions where you can just create your own. So you might, if we wanted to play a league, we'd set up 5 teams and then we just play against each other in the league. So a DIY competition enables you to create your own cup, tournament or league with up to 32 teams, which can be any combination of player and computer teams, as low as 2 if you want. I don't think they're important at all. I think it's just a look. I mean, to be honest, to me, big heads, medium heads, small heads, I think they're good in that they differentiate the look of the game from FIFA and Pro Evolution Soccer. We're standing at a distance and going, we're a football game with something different from these games. You know, if you wish, you can buy these games and buy ours and get a different product. In the same way you'd buy Championship Manager or Football Manager, and still buy, you know, or LMA, and still buy Pro Evo or FIFA. So it's the same really. We're carving our own niche as a different kind of football game, which is slightly more fun but just as sophisticated to play. Interestingly, we did some research before we really went full steam ahead on the production of the game. And about 9 months ago, we discovered that surveying UK users, if you ask the average user what's their favourite football game, their second favourite football game, most people you ask their favourite football game, they'll say FIFA or Pro Evolution Soccer. Not a surprise. But the majority of people say their second favourite football game is sensible soccer. Even now, we're talking about this was last year. So we know that by default, we have probably got the third biggest football brand anyway. Because the reason is because FIFA and Pro Evolution Soccer players don't really like each other's games very much. So we sit there as like a second favourite team, if you like, people have for football. And I think that's very much where we sit. That's kind of our position. You know, we're the third biggest brand in football in the world. You know, 15 million people have already played sensible soccer. We're not starting from a standing start. It's a question of saying to people, okay, to older users who've played it before, they will probably want to see it and will buy it from curiosity, I'd have thought. And we've got a lot of those. But then the challenge is getting the newer users to come in and play it. But it's much more pick up and playable. My 11-year-old daughter picked up and played it and liked it. It's more accessible to people than something like Pro Evolution Soccer, which has become, like you say, like a fighting game to a certain extent, where you need to really, really master it. And people who work at it love it, they master it, and it is a great game. But it requires dedication, it requires a hardcore gamer mentality. Sensible soccer is something which is more quickly accessible. You can pick it up. A lot of people have always played the game who don't even like football, or they don't like football games. But people who do like football also like it because it's always had this depth of football knowledge underneath it. So it accesses both sides of the market. It's kind of where it sits. To be honest, to me, there's not so much of a competition.
Okay.
Again, I'll give you a dull history lesson, okay? When we were doing a game called Megalomania, which was the game we did before Sensible Soccer, do you know Megalomania?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. We were developing that, and that, I think of all the games I've worked on, that was the hardest one for just working, not sleeping, working through the night, work again and again, endlessly, like months and months and months. And we were playing Kick-Off and Kick-Off 2 all the time during the down phases, waiting for it to assemble and stuff back in those days. And we kind of were getting frustrated by some of the bugs, or features. Things that weren't quite right about Kick-Off 2. And so during the end of the development of Megalomania, we discussed about doing a football game. How would we do it? Blah blah blah. And what we did was our initial step was to take the Megalomania men and dress them up in football kits, which is why the Sensible Soccer guys look like what they do, and also where the perspective comes from is purely Sensible Soccer men. There's Megalomania men dressed up in football kits, and initially they were running around the Megalomania world the very first time they existed, and then we just changed them to a football pitch. That's actually how it came about. So I didn't really see any particular competition with Kick-Off, so to speak. I think I've noticed on some forums and stuff people talk about it. I think that Kick-Off was the best football game in... Well, let me go back a bit further so I can sing our trumpet a bit more. We did a game called Micropro Soccer, I don't remember that.
Yeah.
About 1988. That was at the time, by CMVG, they said the best sports game available on any platform, which was quite nice. So, best football game by default. So we had a little period in the ascendancy. Then there's maybe one or two others. And then Kick-Off had, for a couple of years, 1990, 91. It was definitely the best football game. And then Sensible Soccer from 92 to kind of about 97. But then it crossed over with FIFA, because we were basically the dominant one on the home computers. And FIFA dominated from about 93, 94 on, from about 94, say, on console. So you kind of had that, and then FIFA obviously took over and dominated, and now Pro Evolution Soccer's come in and taken. So Kick-Off's had its time, we've had our time, and I like to think our game's the better game. But then again, I don't really see it as a competition, to be honest.